By the time I was 8, my parents decided to sell me off. They couldn't stand me anymore and couldn't afford my glasses. They hated me because I was an albino. I can't take care of you anymore. I'm going to find someone who wants you. But I doubt anyone in their sane minds would want a disabled child.
I feel like a failure for having you. I would have been fine with just your brother. If you dare go blind before we find a buyer for you, I'll kill you with my own hands.
Those words hurt like hell. Even though they'd been repeatedly calling me a disabled, it hurt every time. I believed I was. I mean, I didn't attend school, and I wasn't allowed to have friends. I was born with albinism and lazy eyes, and my parents absolutely hated it. My name is James, and I had a twin, Gabby. My parents weren't rich, neither were they poor. I would say we lived as average people. Before my twin and I were born, my parents had just gotten new jobs. They were newlyweds and surely weren't ready for kids. Well, my mom got pregnant and didn't have the courage to abort it, so they decided to have us. My mom was forced to quit her job during the 4th month of being pregnant. The doctor had advised her against doing anything stressful. It was also getting hard to do things at the factory where she worked, so quitting was a good idea. Everything fell on my dad. His job paid quite well, and that helped. My mom didn't want to sit idly at home, so she began a business online where she helped people advertise their products. It wasn't so profitable, but it helped a little. We stayed longer than normal in her womb. We came out when she was 10 months pregnant. I came out as an albino with lazy eyes, which scared my parents.
What's wrong with him? I don't want a disabled child. Albinism isn't a disability, sir. The lazy eyes is just a feature that sometimes comes with albinism. He's a healthy and normal child.
You're just saying that to comfort us, doctor. He's disabled. Gosh, I can't believe our misfortune.
The favoritism began from then. My brother had the best glassy skin and normal eyes. His hair was full too, unlike mine. Of course, my parents loved him. My parents refused to take me out with them. They were ashamed of me. Whenever they needed to leave home, they would go individually, so one person had to stay with me. It only made them angrier. When my mom eventually got a job, they began to leave me at home with my grandmother. But my grandmother was just like them. If she needed to go somewhere, she would take Gabby with her and leave me at home. On our 4th birthday, my parents made me wear clothes that covered nearly all of my skin, leaving only my head uncovered. They covered my hair with a huge cap and often covered my eyes when they were talking to people. On the 5th birthday, they found the perfect way to cover me up, which was by dressing me up as Spider-Man. On our 6th birthday, my parents locked me in a room and lied to everyone that I had chickenpox. Only my brother celebrated with friends they invited. That was the last time we celebrated a birthday because my parents ran out of lies. My eyes got worse by the time I was 7, and I needed glasses. My brother went to a normal school, but I was left to stay at home. When my brother returned from school, he would teach me what he was taught. But Gabby wasn't so brilliant, so I was often confused about the things he taught me. My dad soon got fired from work when he got caught stealing with a group of other employees. He had to pay a fine with all of his and my mother's savings to avoid being jailed. We had to rely on my mom's meager salary. It went like that for 2 whole months before my mom lost her cool. She was tired of feeding us alone. They began to argue a lot and often transferred their anger to me. My dad would slap me and call me bad luck. As for my mom, she developed the habit of spitting on me whenever she was angry. It was so disgusting because I hated dirt. She knew that. So whenever she spat on me, she would make me sit without washing until her anger melted off. By the time I was 8, my parents decided to sell me off. They couldn't stand me anymore and couldn't afford my glasses. They hated me because I was an albino.
I can't take care of you anymore. I'm going to find someone who wants you. But I doubt anyone in their sane minds would want a disabled child.
I feel like a failure for having you. I would have been fine with just your brother. If you dare go blind before we find a buyer for you, I'll kill you with my own hands.
Those words hurt like hell. Even though they'd been repeatedly calling me a disabled, it hurt every time. I believed I was. I mean, I didn't attend school, and I wasn't allowed to have friends. Luckily for me, my parents found a couple who were desperate for a child. They took me with them to the agency, and the couple immediately showed their likeness for me. It was strange, because I'd never received love. Well, my parents sold off their rights over me and left without even glancing at me. I felt bad for the couple. Why did you buy me, sir and ma? I'm a disabled child, and all I'm going to do is give you problems. My parents always say I brought them bad luck and misfortune. I don't want to give you bad luck. I saw their eyes water, and I broke out in a sob. I felt like I'd made them sad with my misfortune. Surprisingly, they pulled me toward themselves and engulfed me in a hug. It was the first time I'd received a hug, and I was insanely shocked at the sudden love. Their warmth calmed me down.
We're going to love you, son. Those people do not deserve you. We're your new parents, and we will shower you with all of the love we have.
You're not disabled. Albinism is beauty, not a disability. You're a handsome child. Don't ever forget that. Always tell yourself that you're not disabled, okay?
I instantly felt comfortable with them. My new parents kept to their promise. I was showered with so much love that I often burst into tears at how loved I was. They were wealthy and gladly showed me off to everyone. Their families loved me too. They all treated me like a precious egg. They got my eyes treated so that I wouldn't need glasses. They bought me the best clothes. I attended a great school where I finally made friends who strangely loved my look. Slowly, I began to accept that I wasn't bad luck, I wasn't ugly, and my albinism and lazy eyes weren't disabilities. I repaid my new parents by studying hard, at school, and never failing to top my class. I also behaved properly to everyone, which only brought me more love. My parents were always so proud of me. By the time I entered college, I already understood the family business and even helped to solve a situation once. My dad was so impressed and got me my first car as a reward. I completely forgot about my biological parents because I was so happy with the people they sold me off to. I worked even harder and emerged as the best graduating student. It was all over the news, as my dad was a popular businessman and my school was also well known. The day after my graduation, I got so many gifts and congratulations from people, including those who I had no idea of who they were. 1 month later, I resumed work at my dad's company as the vice president. I was already good at the business and ready to be the president, but my dad wasn't ready to step down yet. According to him, he wasn't ready to start sitting idly at home. Once I began working at the company, things changed even better. Our stocks went higher as a result of the new techniques I brought in, making my dad even more impressed. I began attending meetings with him as his successor. My face was always in the media with every milestone our company reached. I'd long gotten rid of my insecurity as an albino, so when I saw a few people on the internet talking about it, I ignored them. 90% loved me and didn't care about it, and that was all that mattered to me. Things went smoothly for the first year, and our company became the second richest in the business industry. I'd also risen to the top 5 richest youngest businessmen, occupying the 3rd spot. I was only 24. My dad boasted about me everywhere, and my mom had to deal with rejecting proposals of the countless rich women who wanted to get married to me. I wasn't ready for marriage yet. At least, not until I was 27. I was in the middle of a meeting one day when I was told that I had visitors who were begging to see me. It wasn't the first time that had happened. Oftentimes, people would come to ask for jobs or beg for money, and if they were qualified, I would find a place to put them in. Those who weren't, I'd simply give them money. I asked the security to bring them to my office and entertain them until I was done with the meeting. It wasn't until the next 30 minutes before it finally ended, and I went to my office. Once I walked in and saw the visitors, I recognized them. They were my biological parents and Gabby. I acted neutral and took my seat opposite them. All 3 of them instantly went on their knees.
Forgive us, James. We regret what we did to you, son. We're suffering a lot. It's so hard for us to feed. Your brother hasn't been able to get a job since he finished high school. Help us, please.
I need to undergo surgery too, James. I have cancer. I'm going to die if it's not treated sooner.
We were so happy to see you in the news. We knew our problems would be sorted once we saw you. I nearly burst into laughter, but I held it in. I'm sorry, but I have no idea of who you 3 are. You see, I lost all of my childhood memories. But you seem like you need help, so I'll help you. Please don't return here after I do.
We won't. We won't ever show our faces to you again. Just give us money, okay? I knew you would help us.
Even though I'd lied about losing my memories, seeing how they didn't care about it after I told them made me feel sad. It meant that they still didn't give a damn about me. I asked my bodyguard to bring me 3 bags of money from a special room. I saw how my biological family beamed with joy when I said that, but I kept a straight face. When the bags of money were given to them, I issued a stern warning. I don't like to see people I helped twice. If you ever show your faces to me again, I'm going to call the cops on you.
You don't have to worry about that. This money matters to us more. You'll never see us again.
I'm going to invest wisely and be as rich as you. Then we can compete as rivals. Thank you so much. Rivals? I nearly laughed. I watched as they left my office. From my window, I saw them dancing once they got out of the gates. Their happiness was surely going to be switched to sadness soon. Oh, the money? They were all fake. You see, sometimes people try to make deals with us using fake money, but we always catch them and hand them over to the cops. As for the money, they were always kept in bags in a special room. I didn't want to punish my family directly. They'll receive their punishments when they get to the bank and get caught trying to deposit fake money. 2 days later, I was watching the news when I saw my biological parents and brother in police custody. Apparently, the bank had arrested them when they went to deposit the money. The bank called the police, and when they arrived, my dad tried to resist and was beaten to a pulp. They were sentenced to 4 years in jail each. With their cancer, I doubt they will survive the 4 years. Serves them right. Few months later, I got a mail from them how I should visit them, but I never did. Instead, I got married, had a son, and will often send them pictures of my new houses, cars, and my family, but I never reply to their mails from prison. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
2 weeks later, I went grocery shopping, and on my way back, I was kidnapped by 3 guys.
If you don't give us our share, you are dead meat.
I was tied to a chair every night and tortured. One day, they forgot to tie me up, and I escaped through the window. My parents were so happy to see me again, but I had bruises and was too scared to step outside again. One day, Sally suddenly showed up in my window. I was scared to see her. Hi guys, I'm Jenny, and I almost got arrested for a crime which my twin sister committed. My parents had been shocked when the ultrascan revealed that they were having identical twins. They absolutely weren't expecting 2, so they'd bought things for just 1 child. It had been so hard to get matching items after the scan, but they'd managed to get everything before we came. When people saw us, they were always amused. We were so identical that our parents had to give me a mark on my right leg to differentiate us. Well, you'd have thought it would be so cute when we grew up, but the reverse was the case. My sister Sally was the embodiment of mischief. She was always committing one crime or the other, and mostly the blame fell on me. One time, around the age of 7, my sister had poured over half of our cereal away. When she came to get me in our room, I followed her as quickly as I could to help her with it. While gathering the cereal carefully, my sister excused herself to use the restroom. However, she didn't return alone. She came with my parents. When they asked about who did it, Sally pointed at me. I tried to deny it, but the circumstances all pointed at me as the culprit. I was punished for it, and that made me feel so sad and betrayed. However, that night, she apologized to me with the excuse that she was scared of getting punished. I forgave her, knowing how weak she was when it came to punishments. Unfortunately, she never stopped. Sally would make mistakes and blame everything on me. I would take it without complaining because there was no way I could prove that she was wrong. She did it at school once, and I nearly hated her for it. I was in my class when a senior student suddenly walked in with a professor. He pointed at me immediately.
That's her. She's the one who assaulted and beat us up.
I'd never seen that senior in my entire life, so I knew it wasn't me but Sally. I turned to her for a moment and saw that she was trying to hide her face. I rolled my eyes, tired of keeping up with her shitty attitude. I faced the senior and professor and told them they were mistaken. The professor refused to listen and instead took Sally and I with him. When he got to his office, we were made to stand while he called our parents. I felt so disappointed, knowing he would call my name first. Well, he ended up just saying the twins. He asked about where we were the previous day. My parents told him that I was home with them while my sister was out studying. He then asked what we were wearing, and my parents told him. Then it was out that Sally did it. Rather than take responsibility for her actions, Sally began crying.
Jenny made me do it. She said she hates him and asked me to help her beat him up.
I was dumbfounded. I knew she was lying because she didn't want to be punished alone. But I couldn't afford to allow myself to be punished for something I had zero idea about. I asked the senior if we'd ever spoken, and he shook his head negatively. His response made it even worse, and I immediately regretted why I asked.
I have never spoken to either of you in my entire life. She suddenly came to attack me.
I knew I was done for. Him confirming that he'd never spoken to us made it sound like I truly hated him, and saying my sister suddenly attacked him alongside her statement made it seem true. The professor asked me why I sent my sister to beat someone up, but I denied. It hurt so much to see my sister continuously lying against me in such a situation. I was forced to call on my classmates for help. Thankfully, all of them attested to me being a good and peaceful girl. One of them, fortunately, had seen Sally watching the senior about thrice. The girl who confessed to having seen Sally was the head of our class, and the professor trusted her words to be true. With the evidence now pointing at her, Sally confessed.
I'm so sorry. I didn't intend to beat him up. I also didn't intend to lie against you, Jenny. Please, forgive me. It will never repeat itself. I don't know what came over me. Forgive me, please.
We were all deceived by her tears. I was forced to forgive her. After all, she's my twin. The professor also apologized to the senior, who forgave Sally too. He felt bad to see her crying. After we left the professor's office, Sally burst out laughing. I was shocked.
Oh my God, I can't believe they folded so quickly. Whoa, tears surely work every time.
My mouth hung open in pure surprise. She was crying just a few minutes ago. I was afraid to even speak to her. At that moment, she seemed so dangerous to me. I avoided her for the rest of that day. It got to a point where I began to hate the fact that we were twins because Sally kept getting us in trouble. And most of the time, she twisted the blame to fall on me. She got to know the power of her tears and never failed to use it. I felt so bad that we were twins. After our high school graduation, we began preparing for business school like we've always planned. Well, not always, because Sally was against furthering her education after high school. She still maintained her stance when our parents informed us about wanting to start searching for a good college for us.
I'm not gonna waste my time doing that. I want to open a tattoo parlor. Got it? I don't want to sit behind computers all day. I don't have the brains for that.
If you won't do business, then think of something else. I won't allow you to start a tattoo parlor. That's ridiculous.
I agree. I can't let you waste your life like that.
Well, it's my life, isn't it? Let me live it, okay?
I was surprised to see her speak to our parents in that manner. Even worse, we woke up the next day to find her room nearly empty. Her bags were gone, and so were most of her things. My parents were confused. They looked for her everywhere they could, but couldn't find her. The few of her friends we knew, we checked their homes, but she wasn't in any. We were all devastated. My parents blamed themselves for being the reason for her disappearance. I tried to comfort them, but even I was not doing okay. It felt like a part of me had been stolen. After a whole year passed, we stopped looking for her. We'd involved the police earlier, but they couldn't find her. We concluded that she didn't want us to find her and had hidden herself properly, so we stopped looking. I'd registered at the business school already and was facing life as a college student. Contrary to what I'd thought, business wasn't so hard. In fact, I was thankful to my parents for helping me make that decision. Life kept going until my first month in year 3. I suddenly got a strange mail delivered to the house. I read it and was filled with fear. It was a stranger threatening to kill me. I was afraid. I always avoided getting into fights or even offending people. So who could be trying to kill me? I showed it to my parents, who asked me to wave it off, saying that it could be someone playing pranks on me. I believed that for the first 2 times. But when the letters kept coming afterward, I knew it wasn't a prank. Someone was after me. I decided to write back to the sender, asking who they were and what they wanted. Their next letter answered my questions. Apparently, they knew Sally a year back, and she'd joined them in a robbery attack, but she absconded with all of the money and they were out to kill her. I begged them, telling them I'm not Sally, but they refused to understand and asked me to pay for it. They didn't care if I was Sally or not. All they wanted was their money. As if that wasn't enough, I was returning home one day from school when a woman suddenly began harassing me. She grabbed me by my shirt, requesting for some money. I was embarrassed and pushed her off. "Who are you? I don't owe you."
Shut up, Sally, you liar! Pay me my money this minute or I'm calling the cops on you.
I was so confused. The woman refused to believe that I wasn't Sally. Eventually, we found ourselves at the station. There, the police listened to our stories and figured out that I wasn't Sally. The woman apologized to me in tears. According to her, Sally had scammed her and her husband of $3,000 she promised to be surrogate for them and then disappeared. The cops promised to find Sally and get her money. Once the lady left, I reported the case of the unknown males, and the cops promised to look into it. I dropped my contacts before leaving. When I explained to my parents, they were downcast and felt bad for me. 2 weeks later, I went grocery shopping, and on my way back, I was kidnapped by 3 guys.
If you don't give us our share, you are dead meat.
I was tied to a chair every night and tortured. One day, they forgot to tie me up, and I escaped through the window. My parents were so happy to see me again, but I had bruises and was too scared to step outside again. One day, Sally suddenly showed up in my window. I was scared to see her. She looked so tattered. I opened the window and let her in, but she pushed me back and brought a knife to my throat.
I need to hide here for 2 days. If you tell anyone I'm here, I'll kill you. Got it?
I froze in shock. I was so scared, so I agreed to be quiet. She slept in my room that night. I didn't ask anything. I was too scared to speak. When I prepared to leave for school the next morning, she warned me again against telling anyone, and I promised to be quiet. But I lied. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't afford to be blamed for her mistakes every time. My life was at risk too. She needed to be punished. I didn't go straight to school. Instead, I stopped by the station. I told the cops that Sally was at my house, and they assigned 2 cops to go with me. Sally trusted me, so she was caught off guard when 2 cops burst into my room and arrested her. On our way back to the station, I called our parents, and we all met at the station. After days of investigation, it was discovered that Sally had been involved in robbery, kidnapping, and scamming. The cops were able to arrest all of her fellow robbers in a month, and they were charged to court. They all had multiple crime cases. Sally, for her 3 cases, got 30 years imprisonment. As the cops took her away, she kept screaming her apologies to us, especially me. And that moved me to tears. But how was I sure she was truly sorry? She has always been so cunning. But in the end, she got what she deserved. I couldn't afford to have my life endangered because of her. After that, my parents and I lived a happy life. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying, "I subscribed," and we'll do our best to reply to your comment.
What's a black woman doing here? I hope it's not what I'm thinking, Ben.
Ben was looking nervous, and that bothered me. His father's words sounded racist, and seeing Ben nervous like that made me aware of what was happening.
Dad, I need you to be respectful, please. I love Tina, and I want to marry her. We're engaged already. Believe me, she's a good girl.
Marry her? Are you in your right senses? Have you even given the cultural differences a thought? How sure are you that she's not here for your money? Don't be an idiot, Ben.
Please, don't scold him, sir. I promise you. I love your son. I love him with all of my heart. We've talked about the culture, and we're ready to adjust.
You know you won't, liar. You're just going to have 1 or 2 kids for him before you divorce and take all of his money. I know how your kind acts to whites. Ben, did she bewitch you with her black magic?
My father-in-law was very vocal about her dislike for me, especially my skin color. My name's Tina, and I'm Kenyan. I met Ben 3 years ago. I was working at a restaurant as one of the head chefs, but my boss was quite the abusive one. He didn't care about your position in the restaurant. He would lash out at the slightest provocation. On some occasions, he would hit us. One day, I'd unintentionally cooked something different from what was on the list, and that got my boss angry. He'd hurled all sorts of insults at me, but I didn't reply. I knew I was wrong, so I kept quiet. However, that had angered my boss. Apparently, he thought I was ignoring him by being quiet. As a result of that, he threw a steel pot at me. It hit me badly, but Before I could react, I saw him grab another pot. In fear, I ran out of the kitchen. He followed me. Ben came in right when my boss threw the second pot at me, and he was quick enough to catch it before it hit me. He'd been so angry, even though we were only just strangers then. Out of anger and frustration, I quit immediately. I was fed up with putting up with his silly behaviors. Ben offered to give me a ride, and I didn't decline. He drove to the park and got us ice cream to help me relax. I felt so grateful and thanked him nonstop. He also took me home after we left the park. It seemed as though fate was bringing us together because after that day, we came across each other at a mall. We exchanged numbers then. Ben helped me get a better job after we became friends. I was happy. We were friends for almost a year before confessing our romantic feelings for each other. Then we began dating. After dating for 7 months, Ben proposed marriage to me. I was so happy. The love of my life wanted to be with me forever. I felt so happy that I cried. 2 days after the proposal, he took me to his family. I was surprised at how big their house was. When we were ushered in by his younger brother, I couldn't help but feel nervous. We both sat in the living room and waited for his parents to arrive. When they did, his father's face didn't hide his disgust.
What's a black woman doing here? I hope it's not what I'm thinking, Ben.
Ben was looking nervous, and that bothered me. His father's words sounded racist, and seeing Ben nervous like that made me aware of what was happening.
Dad, I need you to be respectful, please. I love Tina, and I want to marry her. We're engaged already. Believe me, she's a good girl.
Marry her? Are you in your right senses? Have you even given the cultural differences a thought? How sure are you that she's not here for your money? Don't be an idiot, Ben.
Please, don't scold him, sir. I promise you. I love your son. I love him with all of my heart. We've talked about the culture, and we're ready to adjust.
You know you won't, liar. You're just going to have 1 or 2 kids for him before you divorce and take all of his money. I know how your kind acts to whites. Ben, did she bewitch you with her black magic?
I felt sad to hear that. He was being so unfair, and I was already getting teary. Ben noticed it and got angry.
Dad, I don't appreciate you speaking to her like that. She's my future wife, and we love each other. Can you respect that?
Let them be Ken. If Ben chose her, then we should believe in his choice. You know our son. He won't engage someone who isn't worth it.
Mom's right, Dad. She seems so kind and respectful. Let them be and give them your blessings. Never. This lady can't adjust to our culture. She's eventually going to leave Ben. I refuse to accept this.
We all watched as he stormed off and went straight to his room. Tears fell from my eyes. I was so sad. Not getting my soon-to-be father-in-law's approval made me feel so sad. His mother and brother were kind, though. They both comforted me.
Ignore him, okay? He's not always like this. He's just looking out for Ben due to some things he's seen. Don't mind him, darling.
I apologize on his behalf, Tina. He's really not like this. He will surely come around. We accept you, and we'll support you both.
Seeing how kind Ben's mother and brother were, I had a little hope. Maybe his dad will truly come around and accept us. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. When we began our wedding plans, I frequented Ben's family's house. His mom had issues with her legs, so she didn't go out often. Hence, I had to bring whatever I bought to their house to show her. Whenever I went to the house, my father-in-law would refuse to show himself. He would remain in his bedroom until I left the house. Once, I tried going into his room to talk to him.
Get out! Get out of my room, gold digger! I have no gold for you, so get out!
I was so scared when he yelled at me. I immediately ran out, bumping into Ben, who consoled me. Well, after spending quite a long time planning, we finally got married. However, my father-in-law nearly ruined the wedding. During the ceremony, someone burst through the door. When we all turned, it was my father-in-law. He walked straight up, grabbed the microphone, and said,
Ben, I told you not to marry this girl. You don't have my blessing. She is black and good for nothing. There's still time, so please let my son go, black woman.
I felt so embarrassed, as well as Ben. From his words, it was clear that he didn't support us. I ignored him like I used to, until I turned and saw Ben standing on the altar, holding a mic.
Dad, it's high time you stopped. Ever since I introduced Tina to you, you've been on her tail. Everything she does is bad for you. She's tried hard to gain your favor, yet you remain adamant. That's enough. Stop being racist to her.
I could hear murmurs from people in the crowd. Some were looking at me, and they seemed to pity me. My eyes itched with tears. I felt so bad to see so many people pitying me. I turned to my father-in-law, but I couldn't read his expression. He seemed both sad and unfazed. I decided to seize the opportunity to mend our relationship. I walked toward him and knelt down. I swear to you, sir, I love Ben. I'm not going to abandon him. Never. I love him a lot, sir.
Let go of me. You're only being like this because there are a lot of people here. I will never accept you. I'm leaving.
I sadly watched him leave the venue. My husband, his mother, and brother didn't go after him. We tried our best to push it aside and finish the wedding. Luckily, my wedding ended well and everyone returned home. I guess my mother-in-law talked enough sense into him. 2 months after my wedding, my father-in-law showed up in front of my house. He was looking like a lost dog. Ben isn't home, if you came for him.
No, I came for you, Tina. I want to apologize for treating you so badly. I know it's late now, but you have my blessings.
I was so happy. I ushered him into the house and made us tea. He told me how his wife and kids had put him through hell. They stopped talking to him and he felt like he was going insane. He had to see a therapist. It so happened that one of his friends married a nice, rich black woman, who turned out to be a much better partner than his ex-wife, who was white. This experience changed his views about black people, and he was truly sorry. I thanked him so much. We talked for a few more minutes before he finally left. I was the happy that day. Ben was also very happy that his father was finally supporting us. Things continued going smoothly until my sister suddenly introduced an American man as her husband. I didn't feel good about it. I dated American men twice before meeting Ben, who's British, and those relationships didn't last. I already saw them as players, and I couldn't allow my sister to get married to them. Besides, I knew a fellow Kenyan who'd been asking to marry my sister. I felt angry that she was leaving a man from our race for a white man. No! You can't marry him. He won't treat you well. How can you pick him over a good black man who's going to love you for who you are?
Excuse you? Tina, you have no right to choose my life partner for me. I don't remember ever telling you that I'm uncomfortable with my fiancé. Aren't you married to a white man? What the hell is your deal with mine?
Ben is different. He's not American, so he can't be like them. You're not marrying that man, and that's final.
You sound so ridiculous. I'm marrying him, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you get me angrier than this, then I'm going to cut you off. I don't care if you're my sister or not.
I felt so bad. My only sibling was threatening to cut me off her life, just for a stupid white man. I couldn't let him win. I needed to ensure they didn't get married. On the day of the wedding, when the priest asked about anyone who was against the wedding, I stood up and went over to the altar. This man here doesn't love my sister. He's simply experimenting with something with my sister. He's going to leave her and get married to a fellow white woman. Call off this wedding. My sister seemed to have had enough because she came over and slapped me hard across my cheeks before she asked a few men to drag me out. I felt so bad because Ben remained there with them. He couldn't even run after me. I channeled my sadness into anger. The moment Ben returned home and walked to our bedroom, I rushed to him and slapped him. You're so evil. You watched them embarrass me and kept quiet. I hate you. I slapped, kicked, and punched him until he was on the floor. He nearly passed out before I finally left him. I went over to a hotel to stay for a few days. About 2 weeks later, Ben found me and asked for a divorce.
I don't think we can be together anymore. My dad was like this toward you, and you felt so bad until he apologized. Why are you being racist toward your sister's husband? You either apologize to them or we end this thing between us.
I was consumed by anger. I refused to apologize to them. Never. When Ben began pressuring me, I was forced to hit him again. He didn't, for a second, try to hit me back. Well, eventually we got divorced. Everyone supported him, including my parents and my sisters. They all said I was wrong, but I couldn't find anything wrong in what I did. I tried to move back to my parents' house, but they refused. They said they couldn't allow a controlling racist in their lives. That itself made me angry. A controlling racist? Well, Ben was pretty enough to make them fire me from my workplace. I was left jobless and quite broke. I had to get a small apartment after a while of staying at the hotel. My family and Ben's family are still not speaking to me. Ben left the country, and his mother eyes me grudgingly whenever we cross paths. My friends have all abandoned me after hearing the story. I'm all alone, sad, and angry. Someone even posted my pictures online, tagging me as a racist and an HIV carrier, and now no one is asking me out, not even people of my own race. I now live with 4 cats and feel so lonely. Am I really a controlling racist? Or are they just being unkind and unfair to me?
What? What about the rest of the family? Matilda was very clear when drafting the will. She said that none of her other relatives deserved to benefit from her death, as they had neglected her in life. Therefore, she left everything to her granddaughter, to use as she sees fit. Never! That can't happen! We deserve some of that money. We are his children, by the way. I was waiting for her to die so I could get some money and buy a house. This can't be happening. We will settle this in court. Aaron must have manipulated her or something.
This is unheard of. Surely Matilda was a bit out of her mind when she had that thing drafted. It should be nullified and the money distributed equally among all the children.
Ever since I was a child, I've always been very close to my grandmother Matilda. This wasn't so much due to a matter of personality, nor because I was the only granddaughter in the family, but rather a purely practical matter. I was the one who lived closest to her, and therefore also the one who visited her most often. My grandmother had 3 kids, my dad, my Uncle Sam, and my Aunt Jessica. My grandmother lived alone in a large house with its own garden, in a small town about 20 miles from the city. All of her children were already adults, with their own lives established, and had decided many years ago to leave behind life in the countryside to settle indefinitely in the city, where they already had their respective jobs, apartments, and where their children were enrolled in school. One could say, perhaps, that the idea of living at that distance was to be able to visit Grandma Matilda on weekends when people were less busy with their day-to-day activities, but that simply didn't happen. You see, I had lost both my parents in a tragic car accident when I was young. So Grandma basically raised me, and I had a bond with her. I can remember we had a lot in common. So even when I moved out from her house, I was often the only granddaughter to visit and check on her.
I wish the rest of your cousins and uncles would make the effort to come by more often.
They don't?
Not even on Sundays, and I know for a fact that nobody is busy on Sundays. It wouldn't be the first time I hear that one of my children has used the last day of the week to go fishing or to take the kids to the pool. I'm not even asking for them to come every week. Once a month would be enough for me.
Don't be discouraged. Next month we're having a family gathering. You'll be able to see them all there. That should have been a comfort, but it really didn't mean anything remotely similar. The family gathering I was talking about was an event we organized once a year, where all of Matilda's relatives would gather on a Saturday at her house for lunch. It was more of a charade than anything else, where we all pretended to get along well and were very close to each other for as long as the gathering lasted. These kinds of meetings never went wrong, in the sense that no one fought. However, they didn't exactly serve to bring people together either, because as soon as the clock struck 6 in the evening, everyone dispersed to their respective homes, as if the workday were already over, and they wanted nothing more to do with the matter until the following year. It was a pity how unsupportive they were of Grandma Matilda, but back then I didn't dwell on it much. Her loss was my gain after all, since I enjoyed being with her, and the fact that she didn't have visitors so often allowed me to spend more time at her house. So, I spent all my childhood and adolescence in this routine, until I became the only one who visited my grandmother weekly. And I thought it would continue to be that way, until my grandmother became seriously ill and suddenly my uncles and cousins started to visit regularly.
What's this miracle of you coming to see me?
What miracle are you talking about? We've always been here. We've just been a bit busy in the city, with our work.
Yes, of course, even on vacations. Every weekend? I hope you're not waiting for me to drop dead so you can get your hands on my inheritance, because that would be in very poor taste, considering how neglected you've left me. We would never do such a thing. It's unbelievable that you would think that, considering how much we've always helped you. And furthermore, speaking of helping, how would you feel about moving in with us? I'm sure you'd be more comfortable and better taken care of. It's not necessary. I prefer to stay in my house. I already have Erin to take care of me. She's studying nursing and is perfectly capable of taking care of me.
If my relatives were upset that Grandma refused to move in with them, they didn't let me know with words. They simply repeated the offer countless times in the following months, until my grandmother finally passed away, ensuring that she would have a better quality of life in any of their respective apartments. I felt bad for doubting their good intentions, but I couldn't help it. It seemed very strange that they spent years ignoring my grandmother, and then suddenly, when she was diagnosed with a terminal illness, they showed up like good Samaritans to take care of her, under the pretext that family is there to help each other in difficult times. In any case, my suspicions that there was foul play somewhere became evident when the will was read.
All of Matilda's possessions, including the house and the money in her bank accounts, will be left to Erin. What? What about the rest of the family? Matilda was very clear when drafting the will. She said that none of her other relatives deserved to benefit from her death, as they had neglected her in life. Therefore, she left everything to her granddaughter, to use as she sees fit. Never! That can't happen! We deserve some of that money. We are his children, by the way. I was waiting for her to die so I could get some money and buy a house. This can't be happening. We will settle this in court. Erin must have manipulated her or something.
This is unheard of. Surely Matilda was a bit out of her mind when she had that thing drafted. It should be nullified and the money distributed equally among all the children.
My grandmother was perfectly lucid until her last days.
This will was drafted several years before she was diagnosed with her illness. Furthermore, we are professionals here. We wouldn't have allowed a woman who wasn't in her full faculties to draft such a document.
That served to momentarily silence my relatives, seeing that their anger had nowhere to go. My grandmother was richer than they initially imagined, and now that all that money was going to me, my life was going to be even better. If they wanted to keep a portion of the inheritance, they would have to do something about it, and boy, they did. At first, they tried to kindly convince me that what was stated in the will was a mistake, that even if Grandma had written those terrible things on purpose, I was a good person, and surely wouldn't leave them without their share of those assets. Then, seeing that didn't work to make me give in, they opted for more drastic measures.
We didn't want to resort to this, but since you're forcing our hand, we'll have to take it to court. We are sure you manipulated our mother into giving you everything.
To court? What nonsense. And how do you plan to do that? It's already been established that Grandma drafted the will long before she got sick, and she was always of sound mind.
We'll see about that when it's properly analyzed by experts. And believe me, when this is over, you'll regret turning your back on your family when they needed you the most.
Although it was to be expected, right? She's always been ungrateful.
I didn't know what they meant by those insults, because in the end, I was the only one who was with my grandmother until her last moments. But if they wanted to spend the little money they had left on lawyers to try to win a lost case, that was fine by me. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, so I had nothing to worry about. The problem arose when I realized that my relatives, in the war they had waged against me, started talking to the press and appearing on local television to speak ill of me, saying that I had always been the black sheep of the family, and that now, due to a supposed mistake in the will of a sick elderly woman, I was refusing to provide them with much-needed money for them to continue subsisting. It was ridiculous, and therefore I thought it would be appropriate to return the favor in a similar manner, instead of waiting for the verdict of the professionals. So I spoke to a friend.
What do you plan to do? I have some friends who work at the local newspaper. If you want, we can let them know so you can tell your side of the story.
No, that would sound like I need to defend myself from an attack because I could be guilty. I prefer to leave the press for last. First, I would like to try another approach. Did you know that my relatives are extremely superstitious?
And what does that have to do with this?
I was just thinking that, given their belief in horoscopes and astrology, it's very likely that if a medium tells them to do something, they'll comply without hesitation. In fact, I knew that consulting mediums and watching shows about the supernatural was a common activity for most of my family members, as they loved those things and were strong believers in the mystical. So I got to work. I convinced a friend of mine to read the cards for my uncles, without them knowing that he had any connection to me. In the end, my friend did what any tarot reader would have done when encountering a potential client. He gave them hope that everything would turn out well, that no matter how dark the clouds seemed on the horizon, luck would eventually be on their side. In other words, this fake medium convinced my relatives to invest as much as they could in lawyers to defend their case, to have no fear of overspending, because in the end, the verdict would be in their favor and they would receive much more money than they invested. Of course, it was all lies. Not only did my relatives have a lot to lose, but while they were distracted by the deception, I took the opportunity to clean my new house from Grandma, and while doing so, I found a recording of her that ended up being crucial for my case.
It's a recording from 5 years ago, long before the lady became ill. And in it, Mrs. Matilda explains her reasons for leaving her entire fortune to Aaron. That's not possible. Surely Aaron manipulated her to make that video and change the will, just as we already told the press. No, Aaron had no knowledge of the video's existence until recently. No one knew except Matilda and her notary. Additionally, along with the video, official documents have been found proving that the elderly woman was in full possession of her faculties.
No, there was no trickery involved. Grandma Matilda even went so far as to insult her own children in that recording, calling them ungrateful for not giving her more love and attention in life. So it was clear who the real villains were in that story. It wasn't even necessary to go to court because it was clear that the inheritance would all be mine. I ended up giving that final press conference clarifying everything and finally responding to my family's threats. They, on the other hand, had spent too much on a lost case that left my aunt and uncle broke, and to make matters worse. Now the whole town was aware of the kind of people they were. Neighbors vandalized their houses or stopped speaking to them altogether, and they, unable to recover the invested money or return to the pristine reputation they had before all this happened, they were forced to move far away. And I heard my uncle in the new state mows people's lawns while my aunt took up a cleaning job. As for me, I felt at peace. I had won, and they wouldn't bother me anymore. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.
And although the doctors tried their best, she passed away. It was so incredibly devastating, especially when my Uncle Terry and grandparents made an appearance at the funeral. They were smiling from ear to ear and were loving seeing that Chantrell had passed away. Nathan did his best to ignore them, but then Uncle Terry went up and tried to take a selfie next to the open casket, and Uncle Nathan couldn't hold back his frustrations anymore. Fueled with rage, he ran over and smashed Terry's phone and then proceeded to punch him until he was unconscious. The police had to show up to break up the fight, but luckily no one pressed charges against each other and everyone was allowed to go home. Hi there, my name is Morris and I wish to share with you the story of how I became the owner of a very successful company. I do need to explain a few things first though so you can better understand what I mean by that though. For starters, my family doesn't have a great history of being very open-minded. Back when my father and his two brothers were in their 20s, the three of them were trying to figure out who they were. My father was the most successful as he managed to not only find a job as an accountant for a large firm, but he also met my mother shortly after doing so. A year later, my Uncle Nathan came home with a woman that he had started dating, and at the time, he had wanted to introduce her to the family, as he was thinking about proposing to her. The second that my other Uncle Terry and my grandparents saw her, however, they lost their minds. You see, my Uncle Nathan had fallen in love with a black woman by the name of Chantrell, and my father and mother were the only members of my family to accept them. Both my grandparents and my Uncle Terry started yelling at Chantrell and called her all kinds of racist names.
How dare you come to our house and dirty it with your presence? Nathan, I always knew you were an idiot, but to date a black person, that's just a whole new level of stupid. Your brother is right. I demand that you break up with this inferior woman right this instant. How dare you treat Chantrell like that? This is the woman I love, and you have no right to speak to her like that. If you don't start acting right, then I'll disown you.
My Uncle Nathan tried to argue on behalf of Chantrell and himself, but my Uncle Terry wasn't having any of it. They got into a fist fight, and after that day, my Uncle Nathan walked away and swore that he would never forgive his family. Thankfully, his relationship with my father remained good, as my father and mother were the only ones that did not see anything wrong with Nathan dating a woman of a different race. In fact, they were just happy that he had found love. Years passed, and I was born, and my father and mother had to live dual lives. On one hand, they wanted to love and support my grandparents and my Uncle Terry, but on the other, they still loved Nathan and Chantrell, who had gotten married. It was difficult for them, but they made do. My father's accounting skills ended up being put to good use, as Nathan and Chantrell were excellent at investing money into companies and finding ways to make them profitable. They had acquired more than a handful of different companies over the years. Some factories, restaurants, and even some computer programming firms. They had a knack for hiring amazing managers that kept the businesses running smoothly. As I got older, I learned that my aunt and uncle had tried to have a child of their own, but my aunt had a miscarriage and was unfortunately unable to have children after that. I can't imagine how painful it must have been for them, but after that, they began to treat me as if I was one of their own children. They spoiled me rotten, and when I got older, my uncle took me under his wing and showed me the ropes of their various businesses. Surprisingly, I was able to pick up a lot of hard lessons from him and like him and my aunt. I appeared to have a knack for seeing the profitability of a business fairly quickly. It did feel weird to keep my relationship with my Aunt Chantrell and Uncle Nathan a secret from the rest of the family, but my father insisted that it was for the best, as they would never understand, and he didn't want me to be disowned like they had done to Nathan. Personally, I didn't care if they did. After all, I couldn't understand how a family could do something so horrible to a fellow family member. Just as I was about to attend college, my Aunt Chantrell became very sick, and although the doctors tried their best, she passed away. It was so incredibly devastating, especially when my Uncle Terry and grandparents made an appearance at the funeral. They were smiling from ear to ear and were loving seeing that Chantrell had passed away. Nathan did his best to ignore them, but then Uncle Terry went up and tried to take a selfie next to the open casket, and Uncle Nathan couldn't hold back his frustrations anymore. Fueled with rage, he ran over and smashed Terry's phone and then proceeded to punch him until he was unconscious. The police had to show up to break up the fight, but luckily no one pressed charges against each other and everyone was allowed to go home. After that, Uncle Nathan took me aside and had some words with me.
Hey Morris, listen, I need to talk to you about something. I know that you are only in college, but I want you to start thinking about your future. You see, just like your aunt, I won't always be here, and since I have no children of my own, I want to leave my businesses to you. Is that something that you would be interested in?
Of course, Uncle Nathan. It would be an honor to continue your legacy. But that isn't for many, many years from now, though. At least that's what I thought. But after my aunt passed away, my Uncle Nathan had lost the will to live. He had loved her so much that he really let his health go, and only a few years after my aunt passed away, Uncle Nathan did as well. It was such a strange thing. The doctors were puzzled, but thought that maybe he had had an untreated brain tumor and passed away in his sleep. But my parents and I knew that it was from a broken heart. Without Chantrell, he had lost the will to live and couldn't imagine a life without her. A week after his funeral, the whole family met at my Uncle Nathan's lawyer's office. My grandparents, my parents, my uncle and I were there, along with Chantrell's sister and her daughter. The office felt very crowded, but thankfully the reading of the will didn't take very long. The lawyer read it and announced that Chantrell's sister and niece would receive a very large sum of money, as well as a lake house that my aunt and uncle had owned. My parents would receive enough money to pay off their house, as they always supported Nathan and Chantrell. As for me, my aunt and uncle left me all of their businesses, as well as enough money to run them for several years, so that I could have plenty of time to learn how to run them efficiently. My grandparents and uncle were furious. They had expected to get something as well and couldn't understand why they had been excluded. Later, after we were back at my grandparents' house, my uncle approached me.
Hey Morris, listen, you're way too young to be able to handle all those businesses on your own.
I don't think that I agree with you. I'm almost done with college, and Uncle Nathan has been preparing me for this for a long time.
That idiot didn't know what he was talking about. Look at how he debased himself by marrying a black woman. He could have married a beautiful white woman and had carried on the family name, but instead, he wasted his life with an inferior woman.
How can you say that about him or about Aunt Chantrell? She was an amazing woman.
Oh, now he has you saying stupid stuff too. Chantrell wasn't even human. You would do yourself well to never get mixed up with someone who isn't white. At any rate, just give it some thought. It's only fair that you share the wealth with the rest of the family after all.
His words angered me so much, and so I just stormed off. Honestly, how could you allow your heart to be so full of hate? It was so incredibly disgusting. I especially found it funny that he had expected my Uncle Nathan to have children and carry on the family name, because every woman that my Uncle Terry approached were instantly disgusted by him. Hence, why my father and Uncle Nathan were so important to have children. At any rate, I did my best to try to ignore his foolish comments and just focus on taking over Uncle Nathan's businesses. When then, an idea came to me. As I went over the various companies that Uncle Nathan owned, I saw a tech company that did not fit in with the rest. I instantly knew what I needed to do with it, and so I called up my Uncle Terry. Hey, Uncle Terry. I may have been hasty the other day, and I wanted to apologize to you and to show you that there are no hard feelings. I wanted to make a great offer to you.
Oh yeah? Well, go ahead. Let's hear it. I don't have all day.
Well, I can't just give you a company, but I do have one that shows a lot of potential, and I can sell it to you for $70,000. All you have to do is buy it from me and take on the ownership, and you'll be made a millionaire practically overnight.
Is that so? What's the catch?
No catch. The pay is just for legal purposes. Honestly, there are so many companies to keep track of that you'll be doing me a huge favor. That company made over $1 million in profit last year, and I know that you'll do good things with it.
Well, shoot. Okay, you have yourself a deal. I knew that you would come around and see things our way.
I did in fact not see things their way. But I needed him to take the bait, and he did. Hook, line, and sinker. The truth was that there was a really huge problem with the company, but I wasn't going to tell my uncle anything of the sort. And after my lawyer took care of all the paperwork and passed off the ownership of the company to my uncle, I had to stifle a laugh as we shook on the deal. The fool thought he was going to be rich beyond his dreams, but he had bought nothing but his own doom. You see, the year before the company was incredibly profitable, but they had invested all their profit and had taken out massive loans to cover their expenses. Unfortunately, this year had been devastating to them, and only some very good or miraculous leadership could right that ship and make them not go bankrupt. And my Uncle Terry was most certainly not that person. 2 months after I sold him the company, I had finished up college and was putting in a lot of work and effort to learn the ropes of how to manage all the various businesses that I had inherited. It was a lot of difficult work and late nights with little sleep, but as the weeks passed, I found it easier and easier to manage. The more I got to know the various general managers and managers in general, the more I could trust them to handle more tasks, and things began to really run smoothly. As for my uncle, though, he was struggling to keep things afloat, and he called me up to complain and give crap.
You sold me a lemon. You knew that they were in financial ruin, and you lied and told me that they would make me rich.
I did nothing of the sort. I told you that they were profitable last year. Honestly, with a very good leader, they could have continued to be profitable, but you are too stupid to know how to do that. Chantrell, however, would have been able to. I guess that makes you inferior human after all. It's almost as if the color of someone's skin doesn't matter at all. But the contents of their brain do, and yours is clearly empty. Sorry that you have buyer's remorse, but you're stuck with them.
No, Morris, please. I need your help. Can't you buy the company back? Or maybe loan me some money so I can get it going and maybe try to become profitable again?
Why would I do that?
If you don't, then I'll be ruined. You know that when I bought the company that I took over their debt. If they go bankrupt, it will ruin me. I'll never be able to pay back all the money that they owe. Please help me.
I chose to ignore him, after all. This had been my plan all along. A few weeks passed, and my uncle was forced to liquidate the company and to declare bankruptcy. He was right. He owed so much money that there was no way that he could ever earn enough money to pay off all that debt. It would take him 10 lifetimes in order to do so. In the end, he was so depressed that he took his own life. Deep down, I did feel guilty, but after the way he and my grandparents had treated Chantrell and Nathan, I felt that it was a bit justified. As for my grandparents, Terry had been their primary caregiver as they were unable to live on their own anymore. My parents ended up putting them in a home full of black caregivers as they had no desire to live with them, as they were even more racist than my Uncle Terry had been. So my grandparents were treated horribly and were constantly calling and asking my parents to take them back home. but they refused. I'm sure they wished to die than stay there. Did my parents do a bad thing?